Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic? And were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, reported yesterday that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz inadvertently added him earlier this month to a group chat about military strikes on Yemeni Houthis. According to Goldberg, the group included Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and others, many others. In the article, Goldberg described his initial skepticism, wondering if the unsolicited outreach was part of a disinformation campaign. Goldberg wrote that Hegseth on Saturday, March 15th, texted the group the war plan 2 hours before the strikes, which included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. Goldberg left the group after he concluded it was almost certainly real.
Is Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. You've been covering national security issues for a long time.
The national security world is a pretty serious world, and especially at the level below the principals, there are people who take their responsibilities extremely seriously and take security and safety and cybersecurity and digital security very, very seriously. We both know of people who've gone to prison for mishandling sensitive information. But I've never experienced this through, the pre-9/11 period, 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on. These are life and death issues, and you don't just put out specific targeting information, specific timings of attacks that have not yet taken place into a commercial messaging app.
The thing about Signal chats is you have to invite people. You have to list the names to create a group. So there was a conscious just adding of you to this group.
Yes. Look, I mean, we can say this now. We know American pilots are involved in this operation. That's very, very dangerous work. I found out about this as a civilian 2 hours before the operation launched. The last thing I want, even as a reporter who wants to know about government decision-making, obviously, the last thing I want is to see American lives endangered in any way.
Let me play what Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had to say.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
I don't expect you're going to respond to every aspect of that, but nobody was texting war plans. Again, you have extensive reporting. Anybody can read it. What is your reaction to that?
Look, I'm going to be responsible here and not disclose the things that I read and saw. I will describe them to you. The specific time of a future attack, specific targets, including human targets, meant to be killed in that attack, weapons systems, even weather reports. I don't know why Hexet was sharing it with everybody. I mean, the precise detail of, and then a long section on sequencing. This is going to happen. Then that is going to happen. After that happens, this happens. Then that happens. And then we go and find out if it worked. I mean, you know, he can say that it wasn't a war plan, but it was a minute by minute accounting of what was about to happen, organized by CENTCOM, Central Command. This is their plan, and he was taking their plan and sharing it with a bunch of civilian leaders. I'm reading this and I'm wondering, not only why am I reading this, but why would the Secretary of the Treasury need to know the precise attack sequence of this upcoming operation? Again, I don't want to talk about weapons systems, packages, targets in any specificity because, you know, I'm trying to be, I want to be a responsible person, and I'm more interested in the decision making anyway than I am in the actual technical details of it. But the whole thing is just very flummoxing to me because I haven't seen this kind of unserious behavior before. And the Secretary of Defense, all due respect, in that presentation seems like a person who's unserious and is trying to deflect from the fact that he participated in a conversation on an unclassified commercial messaging app that he probably shouldn't have participated in.
National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Advisor Waltz, thank you for joining us tonight. But how did a Trump-hating editor of The Atlantic end up on your Signal chat?
You know, Laura, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but of all the people out there, somehow this guy who has lied about the president, who has lied to Gold Star families, he's lied to their attorneys, gone to Russia hoax, gone to just all kinds of links to lie and smear the president of the United States, and he's the one that somehow gets on somebody's contact and then gets sucked into this group. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone, and we're going to figure out how this happened.
So you don't know what staffer is responsible for this right now?
Well, look, a staffer wasn't responsible, and look, I take full responsibility. I built the group. My job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did the
execute
number? I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name, and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact, so of course I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now, whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
So your staffer did not put his contact information. But how did it end up in your phone?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay. But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious. How's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then somehow it gets sucked in.
Someone sent you that
it gets
contact.
sucked in.
Was there someone else supposed to be on the chat that wasn't on the chat that you thought was on the chat?
So the person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
Who
guy.
was that?
Look,
okay.
Laura, I take responsibility. I built the group.
Okay.
So but look, that's the part that we have to figure out.
The Atlantic told us in part that attempts to disparage and discredit us in our reporting follow an obvious playbook by elected officials and others of power who are hostile to journalists and First Amendment rights of all Americans. They're saying don't blame the messenger.
Lied about Russia, lied about Gold Star families, lied about even as last year in terms of the president paying for the family of a Gold Star family that he absolutely did. I mean, lie after lie after lie.
Have they ever apologized for any of that?
No. I mean, this is, do we care about the mainstream media? Do we care about the Atlantic? What I care about is staying focused on mission, accomplishing the president's agenda, getting these things done, cleaning up the Biden messes from Afghanistan to Ukraine to the Houthis to the border to China all over South America to the Arctic where we're completely exposed to NATO that's not paying up. And the president has had success after success, and he's got a fantastic national security team.
Yeah, and I was very adamant today and very clear that there was no classified information in this text chat. And the Democrats, of course, are predictably, they're going to jump on this. But should Goldberg just release the other information that he has? Because he's standing on this, well, I'm not going to release this information because I have my standards and journalistic standards. Okay, but it's not classified information, so does it matter? Would you care if the rest of this information came out?
Look, I mean, I would prefer, certainly, as the president was saying today, if we could all sit in a steel-lined lead room and have all of these conversations. I certainly want our deliberations to stay confidential. So, no, of course I don't want it all out there, because these were conversations back and forth that you should be able to have confidentially. But what you also saw was a healthy policy debate in how we were going to achieve this for the president, what would be the results, what should be the timeline. And I think, again, I am fortunate to work for this president. I am fortunate to help him execute this vision, and incredibly fortunate to have this team around him.
But there's no classified information in this exchange.
No classified information.
Director Gabbard, did you participate in the group chat with Secretary of Defense and other Trump senior officials discussing the Yemen war plans?
Senator, I don't want to get into the specifics.
Ma'am, were you on? You're not going to be willing to address. So you're not. Are you denying? Matt, will you answer my question, ma'am? You were not TG on this group chat.
I'm not going to get into the specifics.
So you refuse to acknowledge whether you were on this group chat.
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Why are you going to get into the specifics? Is it because it's all classified?
Because this is currently under review by the National Security
Because
Council.
it's all classified? If it's not classified, share the text now.
As the White House previously
Is it classified
stated,
or non-classified information on this text?
I can confirm.
Director Radcliffe, were you on the group chat?
Senator, I was on a signal messaging group. And finally, just please, so my communications, to be clear, in a signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination, because if it's not classified, share the text with the committee. Let me go on. Director Gabbard, you are the security executive and access to guidelines classified information. Did you contact the Secretary of others after the signal was out and say, hey, can you do this?
There was no classified material that was shared in that
So then if there were no classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security.
Senator, I'll reiterate that there was no classified material that was shared in that
And if there's no classified materials, share. And then if there's no classified materials, then you can't even answer the question whether you're on the chat.
Today, The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg released the entire signal chat, showing that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth provided the exact timings of warplane launches and when bombs would drop.
The administration is saying that there's nothing classified or secret or sensitive in these. So at a certain point, I just felt, let our readers decide for themselves.
But let's talk about those texts a little further. And as you say, you're allowing readers to decide for themselves what they mean. But just walk us through some of the texts you saw there from particularly the Secretary of Defense and then later the National Security Advisor about the operation that day in Yemen.
Right. Look, the key thing here is, this is an interesting one you have up on the screen there. This is Mike Waltz in a commercial messaging app providing real-time intelligence updates about the consequences of an American attack. The core of this chain is the statement, is the long text issued by Pete Hegseth 2 hours before the first bombs fell in Yemen. Everybody can find it on the Atlantic website now, in which he goes hour by hour, sometimes minute by minute, here's what's going to happen. And the thing that really struck me as I'm, again, reading this on my phone in a Safeway parking lot, the thing that really struck me is that he's telling me and others that an attack hasn't even begun yet, but the planes are launching in 31 minutes. Like imagine this text went to someone else. I mean, if that's not secret, classified information about, or the most sensitive kind of government information in the world, I don't know what is.
I want to start with what we've been hearing from administration officials throughout the week, various excuses, explanations for how you were added to that Signal group chat. Jeffrey, what do you make of those explanations?
This isn't the Matrix. Phone numbers don't just get sucked into other phones. I don't know what he's talking about. He's telling everyone that he's never met me or spoken to me. That's simply not true. I understand why he's doing it. But, you know, this has become a somewhat farcical situation. There's no subterfuge here. My number was in his phone. He mistakenly added me to the group chat. There we go.